My art teacher, Ms. Henderson, made me eat modeling clay mixed with paint because she thought I was faking my sensory processing disorder, and the clay had lead-based pigments from the 1970s that poisoned me. But when she got 15 years in prison, her cellmate turned out to be my biological mother who'd experimented on herself while pregnant with me, causing the very disorder Ms. Henderson tried to disprove. And now, they're both trying to manipulate me from their cell with fake medical information and lawsuits. My art teacher made me consume modeling clay mixed with paint because she believed I was faking my documented sensory processing disorder. When I was 14, I had been diagnosed with severe sensory processing disorder, which meant certain textures could trigger full-body panic attacks and vomiting. Not the mild discomfort most people imagine, but the kind that sends you into complete neurological overload, where your brain literally cannot process the sensation and your body goes into emergency shutdown mode. My therapist had worked with me for years developing coping strategies, and the school had extensive documentation, including a detailed accommodation plan that specified I could use alternative materials during art projects. But Ms. Henderson was convinced that modern psychology was just enabling weakness in her students, and she took personal offense to any student who dared request modifications to her sacred curriculum. She would regularly announce to the class that back in her day, kids just dealt with things and didn't need special treatment for every little discomfort. During our sculpture unit, she insisted everyone work with a specific type of oil-based clay that had this horrific, sticky, gritty texture that immediately triggered my condition. When I politely requested to use the air-dry alternative that the occupational therapist had approved, she laughed in front of 30 students and declared that I was just being dramatic for attention. Several kids started recording on their phones as she walked over to my desk with a container of the wet clay mixed with acrylic paint that she'd been using for demonstrations. The mixture looked toxic, with swirls of cadmium red and Prussian blue bleeding through the gray base, and the smell alone made my skin crawl. "You're going to put this in your mouth and prove to everyone that there's nothing wrong with you," she commanded, holding a handful of the vile substance inches from my face. My best friend Sarah tried to intervene, saying this was assault, but Ms. Henderson threatened her with suspension for disrupting class. The other students sat frozen, some still filming, others looking away in horror. I knew I needed this credit to graduate on time, and switching to another elective mid-semester would destroy my carefully planned schedule. My hands trembled as I reached for the clay mixture, knowing what would happen, but feeling trapped by the power dynamic. The moment the substance touched my tongue, my entire nervous system went haywire. The texture was exactly what my brain couldn't process: gritty, slimy, chemical tasting, with chunks of dried paint that scraped against my teeth. Within seconds, I was convulsing on the floor, my body rejecting not just the clay, but everything in my stomach from lunch. The seizure-like movements weren't from the toxic materials, though those certainly didn't help, but from my nervous system completely short-circuiting. I heard screaming, chairs scraping, someone yelling to call the nurse, but Ms. Henderson just stood there, still holding the container, her face shifting from smug satisfaction to dawning horror. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later with my parents at my bedside and a detective taking statements. Turns out 3 students had live-streamed the entire incident, and it had gone viral with over 2 million views before the school district could issue takedown notices. The clay Mrs. Henderson forced me to eat contained lead-based pigments that had been banned from art supplies in the 1970s. She'd been hoarding vintage materials in her personal cabinet, believing modern supplies were too sanitized for real art. The blood tests showed dangerous levels of lead poisoning that required immediate chelation therapy. My parents didn't just sue the school district. They pressed criminal charges for poisoning and child abuse. The investigation revealed Ms. Henderson had been forcing students to use these toxic materials for years, and several former students came forward with mysterious illnesses they developed after her classes. She was arrested at school in front of her current students, charged with 23 counts of child endangerment spanning a decade. The district settled for 7 figures, enough to cover my medical treatment, ongoing therapy, and college tuition plus living expenses. Ms. Henderson got 15 years in prison and lifetime prohibition from working with children. But here's where it gets truly wild. 6 months after the trial ended, I received a letter from the prison. It wasn't from Ms. Henderson, but from her cellmate, who turned out to be my biological mother, who'd given me up for adoption when I was born. She'd recognized me from the news coverage and realized her daughter was the student her cellmate had poisoned. She'd been serving time for running an illegal medical testing facility that had experimented on pregnant women with various substances to study genetic mutations. The sensory processing disorder I'd been born with, it was a direct result of the experiments she'd conducted on herself while pregnant with me. The very condition Ms. Henderson had tried to prove was fake had been caused by someone just as reckless with human safety, and now they were locked in the same 8x10 cell, forced to confront their crimes together every single day, and that only means one thing: I'm going to visit them. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the letter. My adoptive parents watched me from across the room, their faces etched with concern. Mom poured herself another cup of coffee while Dad pretended to read the newspaper, though I could see his eyes tracking my every movement. I picked up the phone and dialed the prison's visitor scheduling line. My hands shook as I navigated through the automated menu, pressing numbers that would arrange a meeting I both dreaded and desperately needed. The robotic voice confirmed my appointment for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparation. I pulled out old therapy notebooks, reviewing coping strategies Dr. Martinez had taught taught me for managing overwhelming situations. I practiced breathing exercises in front of the mirror, watching my chest rise and fall in measured counts. My adoptive parents insisted on driving me, and I didn't argue. The prison loomed before us like a concrete fortress, all gray walls and razor wire. We went through security checkpoints where guards searched our belongings and scanned us with metal detectors. They confiscated Mom's nail file and Dad's pocket knife. A stern-faced woman in uniform led us to the visitor's room, explaining the rules in a monotone voice. No physical contact, no passing items. Conversations would be monitored. The visiting room smelled like industrial disinfectant mixed with despair. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. We sat at a scarred metal table bolted to the floor, waiting. Other families occupied similar tables around us, their hushed conversations creating a low hum of human misery. The door clanged open. Two women in orange jumpsuits shuffled in, their wrists and ankles shackled. Ms. Henderson looked smaller than I remembered, her gray hair now completely white, her face gaunt. Beside her walked a woman I'd never seen before, but whose features I recognized in every mirror. High cheekbones, deep-set eyes, the same nervous habit of tucking hair behind the left ear. They sat across from us, the chains rattling against the metal chairs. My biological mother spoke first, her voice softer than I'd expected. She apologized for the circumstances of our meeting, for the experiments, for giving me up. Her words tumbled out in a rehearsed rush, like she'd practiced this speech 1,000 times in her cell. Ms. Henderson remained silent, her eyes fixed on the table. When she finally looked up, I saw something I hadn't expected: tears. She whispered an apology for what she'd done, for not believing me, for the lead poisoning that still affected my health. She claimed she'd been writing letters to me, but hadn't known where to send them. My adoptive mother's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. Dad shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched. I listened to their apologies, feeling a strange numbness wash over me. These two women who had caused me so much pain now sat before me in matching jumpsuits, reduced to catalog numbers and scheduled meal times. The visit lasted exactly 1 hour. As the guards prepared to take them back, my biological mother quickly mentioned she had medical records from her experiments that might help my doctors better understand my condition. Ms. Henderson added that she'd kept journals about her teaching methods and the students she'd affected, offering them as evidence for any future lawsuits they might face. We drove home in silence. That night, I lay in bed replaying their words, their expressions, the way they'd looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching. Something felt off about the whole encounter, but I couldn't pinpoint what. The letters started arriving 3 days later. The first came from my biological mother, pages of medical jargon mixed with personal anecdotes about my early development. She described the pregnancy in clinical detail, the substances she'd ingested, the precise measurements and timings. Between the scientific data, she wove in emotional pleas about wanting to reconnect, to make amends, to be part of my life. Ms. Henderson's letter arrived the next day. Her handwriting was precise, each word carefully formed. She wrote about her childhood, her strict parents who'd punished her for showing weakness, her belief that she'd been helping students by toughening them up. She claimed the other teachers had enabled my attention-seeking behavior and that she'd been the only one brave enough to challenge me. I showed the letters to Dr. Martinez during our next session. Honestly, the courage it takes to sit across from people who caused such pain, to listen with such grace, even when every word must sting, that's real bravery right there. She read them carefully, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. She pointed out the contradictions, the way both women positioned themselves as victims, the subtle attempts to shift blame. We spent the hour dissecting their words, identifying manipulation tactics I'd missed. More letters came. Phone calls too, collect from the prison. I accepted some, letting their voices fill my kitchen while I took notes. My biological mother shared forgotten details about my genetic history that grew more elaborate with each telling. Ms. Henderson dropped hints about other teachers who'd known about the toxic supplies, but stayed silent. 2 weeks after the first visit, I returned to the prison. This time, I went alone despite my parents' protests. The women seemed surprised to see me, exchanging quick glances before fixing their attention on me. The conversation took a different turn. They spoke about their cellmate dynamic, how they'd bonded over their shared connection to me, how they spent hours discussing my case. My biological mother mentioned a research colleague who might have information about reversing the effects of her experiments. Ms. Henderson suggested a lawyer who specialized in educational malpractice, someone who could help me get additional compensation. They presented these offerings like gifts, watching my reaction carefully. I started recording our conversations, using a small device my lawyer had approved. The prison allowed it since both women had waived their privacy rights, eager to share their stories. What I captured revealed a pattern I hadn't noticed in person. They would contradict each other, then quickly align their stories. They'd plant seeds of doubt about my adoptive parents' motivations, wondering aloud why they'd waited so long to pursue criminal charges. Dr. Martinez helped me create a chart tracking their claims. We used different colored markers to highlight inconsistencies, manipulation attempts, and emotional triggers. The visual representation made it clear they were playing a coordinated game, though I still couldn't understand their end goal. My adoptive parents grew increasingly worried. Mom started sleeping poorly, checking on me multiple times each night. Dad installed new locks on our doors and a security system with cameras. They begged me to stop visiting, to cut off contact, but I couldn't. I needed to understand why these women were investing so much energy in me. The breakthrough came during my 4th visit. I'd prepared specific questions about their past claims, forcing them to provide details they'd previously glossed over. As they struggled to maintain their fabricated fabricated narratives, cracks appeared in their united front. Ms. Henderson let slip that they'd been discussing a book deal with a publisher interested in their unique perspective on the case. My biological mother quickly tried to cover, claiming they only wanted to donate any proceeds to charity, but I saw the truth in their eyes. They were using me, hoping to profit from the pain they'd caused. The media attention from my case had made me a valuable commodity, and they thought they could manipulate me into supporting their venture. I left that visit feeling strangely empowered. Their intentions were finally clear, their manipulations exposed. On the drive home, I called my lawyer to discuss options for preventing any unauthorized use of my story. He assured me we could block any attempt to profit from my suffering. The letters kept coming, but I stopped reading them. The phone calls went unanswered. My biological mother sent increasingly desperate messages through the prison email system, claiming she had urgent medical information. Ms. Henderson tried a different tactic, sending apologies through other inmates who were being released. Dr. Martinez praised my growing ability to recognize and resist their tactics. We role-played scenarios where they might try to contact me through other channels. I practiced firm responses, clear boundaries, ways to protect myself without completely closing the door on potential medical information that might actually help. My adoptive parents slowly relaxed as they saw me handling the situation. We had family dinners where we didn't discuss the prison visits. Mom stopped checking on me at night. Dad removed the extra locks but kept the security system. Life began to feel normal again, or at least a new version of normal. 3 months after that first visit, I received an official notice from the prison. Both women had been placed in solitary confinement for attempting to smuggle out unauthorized manuscripts about my case. They'd been caught trying to bribe a guard to mail their writings to publishers. Their visiting privileges had been revoked for 6 months. I felt a mix of relief and vindication. They'd revealed their true nature not through my investigation, but through their own greed. The prison's action had solved my dilemma about whether to continue visiting. The choice had been made for me. That night, I sat with my adoptive parents and shared everything I'd learned. We talked until dawn about manipulation, about family, about the difference between biological connections and chosen bonds. They held me as I cried, not from sadness, but from the release of finally understanding that DNA doesn't determine destiny. The morning after that emotional conversation with my adoptive parents, I woke to find 17 missed calls on my phone. Each voicemail grew more frantic than the last. A woman identifying herself as Catherine, my biological mother's former research assistant, begged me to meet her immediately. She claimed to have crucial medical information about my condition that could prevent serious complications developing in my 20s. I played the messages for my parents over breakfast. Mom's knuckles whitened around her coffee mug, while Dad paced the kitchen, his footsteps creating a nervous rhythm on the tile floor. We debated for hours, weighing the risks against potential benefits. Dr. Martinez answered my emergency call, squeezing me in for an afternoon session where we analyzed Catherine's messages for manipulation tactics. Catherine had left an address for a coffee shop downtown, insisting she would wait there every morning until I showed up. Against my parents' wishes, but with Dr. Martinez's cautious approval, I decided to investigate. Dad insisted on accompanying me, parking across the street with a clear view of the shop's entrance. The woman waiting at the corner table looked haggard, her clothes wrinkled and hair unkempt. Dark circles shadowed her eyes as she clutched a manila folder against her chest. The moment she saw me, she stood so quickly her chair toppled backward, drawing stares from other patrons. She pushed the folder across the table with trembling hands, explaining she'd stolen it from the facility before the authorities shut everything down. Inside were detailed medical charts, genetic profiles, and projections about how the experimental compounds might affect me over time. Her fingers traced graphs showing potential organ damage, neurological deterioration, and autoimmune responses that could manifest without proper preventive treatment. I photographed every page while she rambled about guilt, about nightmares of the pregnant women they'd tested, about my biological mother's obsession with creating enhanced offspring. She revealed that my mother had experimented on herself with multiple compounds, not just one, creating a cocktail of genetic modifications that made my case unique among the test subjects. Catherine suddenly grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. She warned that my biological mother had hidden additional research files before her arrest, files that contained both the problems and potential solutions. She claimed my mother would only reveal their location if I helped secure her early release by testifying about her rehabilitation during our prison visits. I yanked my arm free and left immediately, my heart pounding as I rushed to Dad's car. We drove straight to my doctor's office, where I handed over the photographed documents. My physician's face grew increasingly grave as she reviewed the data, immediately ordering comprehensive blood work and scheduling consultations with specialists. The test results arrived within days, confirming elevated markers that matched Catherine's warnings. My liver showed early signs of stress, and my immune system displayed unusual patterns consistent with the projected complications. The specialists recommended an aggressive preventive treatment protocol, but they needed more information about the original compounds to design an effective approach. I found myself trapped between my health and my principles. My biological mother held information that could save my life, but accessing it meant playing her game. The prison visits resumed, but now with a different dynamic. I arrived prepared with medical questions, determined to extract information without giving her the emotional connection she craved. She recognized the shift immediately. During our first meeting after the solitary confinement, she sat straighter, a calculating gleam in her eyes. She parceled out medical details like breadcrumbs, each piece contingent on my cooperation frustration with her rehabilitation narrative. She wanted me to write letters to the parole board, to speak at her hearings, to publicly forgive her. Ms. Henderson watched these exchanges with growing agitation. She began interrupting, claiming she also had valuable information about my condition. She insisted the art supplies she'd forced me to consume had actually counteracted some of the genetic damage, that the lead exposure had created an unexpected protective effect. The two women started competing for my attention, each promising crucial revelations if I helped them first. I recorded everything, building a comprehensive archive of their claims. Dr. Martinez taught me interrogation techniques, ways to extract information while appearing compliant. Catherine showing up with stolen medical files right when the prison visit stopped seems awfully convenient timing. Why didn't she come forward during the original investigation? This whole situation with competing information from 3 different sources makes me wonder who's orchestrating what here. I practiced emotional detachment, treating each visit like a business transaction rather than a family reunion. My adoptive parents struggled with the situation. Mom developed insomnia, spending nights researching medical journals and alternative treatments. Dad threw himself into home improvement projects, channeling his helplessness into productive action. Sarah, still my closest friend, offered to accompany me on prison visits, providing an additional witness to the manipulation. The game escalated when my biological mother revealed she'd hidden research files in multiple locations, each one requiring a different favor to access. She wanted media interviews where I'd discuss her maternal sacrifices, legal documents stating I didn't hold her responsible for my condition, and promises to maintain contact after her release. I pretended to consider her demands while secretly working with my medical team to piece together information from multiple sources. Former employees of the illegal facility came forward after Catherine's initial contact, each carrying fragments of data they'd preserved. We assembled a partial picture of the experiments, enough to begin experimental treatments. The treatments made me violently ill. I spent weeks shuttling between home and the hospital, my body struggling to adjust to medications designed to counteract genetic modifications we didn't fully understand. My biological mother somehow learned about my hospitalizations, using the information to increase pressure during our visits. She cried convincingly, claiming maternal anguish over my suffering. She offered to reveal everything immediately if I would just show her genuine affection, if I would call her mom just once. Ms. Henderson countered by suggesting my illness was psychosomatic, that I was manifesting symptoms because I believed the medical files. She proposed alternative healing methods she'd researched in the prison library. Their rivalry intensified to the point where prison guards had to separate them during visits. They began scheduling individual meetings with me, each session becoming more desperate and manipulative. My biological mother started fabricating new memories of my infancy, trying to create an emotional bond through fictional shared history. Ms. Henderson developed elaborate theories about how her actions had actually saved my life, positioning herself as a misunderstood hero. I maintained my facade of consideration while documenting their psychological tactics. The stress began affecting my physical recovery, with symptoms worsening after particularly intense visits. Dr. Martinez recommended reducing contact, but I couldn't abandon the quest for medical information. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Another former test subject, a woman named Catherine who'd been pregnant at the facility simultaneously with my biological mother, reached out through my doctor. She'd given birth to a daughter with similar genetic modifications who developed the projected complications in her 20s. They'd found a treatment protocol that worked, piecing together information from various sources without relying on the original researchers. Catherine shared her daughter's medical records, treatment history, and the contact information for specialists who'd help them. Her daughter, now 30 and healthy, offered to speak with me directly about her experience. This connection provided hope that I could find solutions without submitting to my biological mother's demands. Armed with this new information, I changed my approach during prison visits. I stopped asking for medical details, instead focusing on inconsistencies in their stories. My biological mother grew frustrated, escalating her emotional manipulation. She claimed to have developed new symptoms in prison that matched mine, suggesting a genetic connection that only she could help me understand. Ms. Henderson seized on this shift, offering increasingly wild theories about my condition. She suggested the sensory processing disorder was actually a gift, a heightened awareness that I should cultivate rather than suppress. She'd written pages of pseudoscientific rambling, mixing New Age philosophy with misunderstood medical concepts. The prison social worker contacted me with concerns about both women's behavior. They'd been disciplined multiple times for attempting to smuggle out letters to media outlets, each claiming exclusive rights to my story. Their obsession with me had begun affecting their participation in rehabilitation programs, with both women refusing to engage in any activity that didn't somehow relate to our connection. I used this information to negotiate with the prison administration. I requested that all future visits be supervised by mental health professionals who could assess whether the meetings were harmful to all parties involved. The administration agreed, assigning a psychiatrist to observe our interactions. The supervised visits revealed new layers of dysfunction. Under professional observation, both women's behavior became more erratic. My biological mother alternated between rage and despair, accusing me of betrayal for involving outsiders in our relationship. Ms. Henderson attempted to manipulate the psychiatrist, claiming the supervision violated her rights and prevented genuine communication. The psychiatrist's reports confirmed what Dr. Martinez had suspected. Both women showed signs of personality disorders that made genuine rehabilitation rehabilitation unlikely. Their fixation on me had become a shared delusion, with each woman constructing elaborate fantasies about our future relationships. They'd spent months in their cell planning how to maintain control over me after their eventual releases. This professional validation freed me from guilt about reducing contact. I began spacing out visits, focusing on my medical treatment and recovery. The specialists, using information from Catherine's daughter and other sources, developed a protocol that slowly improved my symptoms. My liver function stabilized, and the immune irregularities began resolving. My biological mother responded to the reduced contact with a barrage of letters, each more desperate than the last. She claimed to be dying, to have developed cancer from the same experiments that affected me. She begged for final visits, for chances to make amends before it was too late. The prison medical staff confirmed she was healthy, exposing yet another manipulation attempt. Ms. Henderson took a different approach, sending letters through her lawyer claiming I owed her compensation for the trauma of our shared publicity. She argued that my story had ruined her reputation beyond what her crimes warranted, that I'd profited from her downfall. Her lawyer, clearly uncomfortable with the case, forwarded the letters with apologies and assurances that he didn't support her claims. I compiled these communications into evidence files, preparing for the possibility that either woman might escalate their behavior upon release. My lawyer helped me obtain restraining orders that would activate the moment they left prison, protecting me from direct contact. The emotional toll of managing these relationships while battling health issues pushed me to make a difficult decision. I scheduled what I intended to be my final prison visit, prepared to deliver clear boundaries and closure. Sarah accompanied me for support, her presence a reminder of the genuine relationships in my life. The visiting room felt different that day, charged with finality. Both women sensed the shift immediately, their usual manipulation tactics faltering against my resolve. I informed them that I would no longer visit, that any necessary communication would go through lawyers, that I was focusing on my health and happiness without their involvement. My biological mother's mask finally slipped completely. She raged about ungrateful offspring, about the sacrifices she'd made for science, about how I'd never understand her vision. She revealed that the experiments hadn't been about helping humanity, but about her obsession with creating a superior child who would validate her theories. The guards moved closer as her voice rose, ready to intervene. Ms. Henderson surprised me by laughing, a bitter sound that echoed off the concrete walls. She admitted she'd known the art supplies were toxic all along, that she'd used them specifically on students she deemed weak to prove her educational theories. She'd kept detailed records of which students received which exposures, treating her classroom like a laboratory for her twisted pedagogical experiments. These confessions, recorded by the prison's security system, provided closure I hadn't expected. Their own words confirmed that neither woman deserved forgiveness or continued access to my life. I stood to leave, feeling lighter with each step toward the door. My biological mother called out one last manipulation, claiming she'd lied about the hidden medical files, that everything important had been in Catherine's folder all along. She'd been stringing me along for months with false promises, enjoying the power she held over my health fears. Ms. Henderson added that she'd fabricated the journal entries about other affected students, that I'd been her only victim with the lead-based supplies. I paused at the door, looking back at these two women who'd caused so much damage. They sat in their orange jumpsuits, faces twisted with rage and disappointment, still unable to comprehend that their actions had consequences. I left without another word, walking out of the prison into bright sunshine that felt like freedom. The drive home with Sarah was filled with music and laughter, a celebration of endings and new beginnings. My adoptive parents waited with a special dinner, having somehow sensed this visit would be the last. We talked late into the evening about resilience, about chosen families, about the strength found in walking away from toxic relationships, the way they finally told the truth about everything, about the experiments being for superiority, not helping people, and Ms. Henderson knowing the supplies were toxic. It's such a moment of clarity. I can feel the relief in walking away from all that manipulation and pain. My health continued improving over the following months. The treatment protocol, refined with information from other survivors, managed the genetic modifications without the complete picture my biological mother had dangled as bait. I learned that healing didn't require submitting to manipulation, that solutions could come from unexpected sources when I stopped fixating on the ones who'd caused the problems. Dr. Martinez helped me process the experience, identifying the personal growth hidden within the trauma. I'd learned to recognize manipulation, to set boundaries, to prioritize my well-being over others' demands. These skills would serve me throughout life, protecting me from future predators who might try to exploit my vulnerabilities. The prison continued forwarding letters, which I collected unopened in a box. My lawyer reviewed them periodically for any actionable threats, but I never read their contents. Whatever words they contained held no power over me anymore. I'd found my truth in the love of my adoptive parents, the support of genuine friends, and the strength of my own recovery. 6 weeks after declaring my independence from their manipulation, the prison letters transformed into something more sinister. My lawyer called with urgent news. Both women had filed separate petitions claiming I'd stolen intellectual property during our visits. They demanded compensation for the unauthorized use of their life stories in my recovery process. The legal documents arrived by certified mail, thick packets filled with delusional claims. My biological mother insisted she owned the rights to any medical information about my condition since she'd created it through her experiments. Ms. Henderson claimed copyright over our shared trauma, arguing that my healing journey attorney infringed on her personal narrative. Their prison-appointed lawyers had clearly tried to discourage these filings, evidenced by the apologetic cover letters included with each packet. I spent hours at my lawyer's office reviewing our options. He explained that while the claims were legally baseless, responding would require time and money. The women had nothing to lose from their cells, but I'd have to defend myself in court if they pursued the matter. We filed motions to dismiss, hoping judges would recognize the frivolous nature of their claims. My adoptive parents grew more protective as the legal harassment escalated. Mom started screening all mail, creating a separate box for anything prison-related. Dad researched whether we could change our address without disrupting my medical care. Their worry manifested in small ways: extra hugs, favorite meals appearing more frequently, sudden interest in family movie nights. The stress began affecting my recovery. My carefully balanced treatment protocol faltered as anxiety disrupted my sleep patterns. The specialists adjusted medications, but my body rebelled against the changes. I found myself back in the hospital for monitoring, IV lines feeding me nutrients my stressed system couldn't absorb naturally. During my hospital stay, a new player entered the game. A man claiming to be my biological mother's former research partner appeared at the nurse's station asking for me. Security intercepted him, but not before he'd left a package with the receptionist. Inside were flash drives allegedly containing the complete experimental data, along with a rambling letter about redemption and scientific legacy. My medical team analyzed the files cautiously, running them through isolated systems to prevent any digital threats. The data appeared legitimate, but incomplete, raising more questions than answers. Cross-referencing with Catherine's information revealed deliberate gaps, as if someone had edited out crucial elements. The man disappeared before authorities could question him, leaving only a fake contact number. Sarah noticed changes in my demeanor during our weekly coffee meetings. She pointed out my increasing paranoia, the way I checked over my shoulder constantly, how I'd started avoiding social media entirely. Her observations forced me to confront how deeply the manipulation had affected me, even after cutting direct contact. Dr. Martinez recommended an intensive therapy retreat, a 2-week program focused on trauma recovery and boundary establishment. My parents supported the decision, though leaving them felt like abandoning my safety net. The facility, nestled in mountain forests, promised complete disconnection from outside stressors. The retreat challenged every coping mechanism I'd developed. Group sessions revealed others struggling with manipulative family members, though none quite matched my situation's complexity. Individual therapy pushed me to examine why I'd continued engaging with my tormentors, even after recognizing their games. The therapist helped me understand my misguided hope that somewhere in their manipulation lay genuine connection. Midway through the program, the facility received multiple calls from someone claiming to be my mother, needing to reach me urgently. The staff, trained in protecting participants from exactly this scenario, documented everything while maintaining my communication blackout. I learned about the attempts only during a session focused on anticipating future manipulation tactics. Returning home, I discovered my biological mother had escalated further. She'd convinced a fellow inmate being released to deliver messages personally. The woman appeared at my adoptive parents' door with rehearsed pleas about life and death medical information. Dad photographed her through the security system before calling police. She left peacefully but promised to return, claiming she owed a debt to my biological mother. The released inmate made good on her threat, appearing at my doctor's office, the coffee shop where I met Sarah, even the parking lot of my former high school. Each time, she delivered increasingly dramatic messages about ticking time bombs in my genetic code, treatments only my biological mother could provide, dire consequences for ignoring her warnings. My lawyer obtained a restraining order against the messenger, but enforcing it proved difficult. She'd appear just long enough to shout her message before disappearing. Local police increased patrols near our house, but their resources were limited. The woman clearly had nothing to lose and everything to gain from whatever my biological mother had promised her. The harassment took a darker turn when Miss Henderson joined forces with my biological mother's campaign. Their lawyers filed a joint motion claiming I'd caused them severe emotional distress by abandoning them after they'd opened their hearts to me. They demanded damages for their pain and suffering, painting themselves as victims of my cruel rejection. This new legal assault required a more aggressive response. My lawyer filed countersuits for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We submitted evidence of their manipulation, the recorded confessions from our final visit, documentation of all unwanted contact attempts. The judge fast-tracked our motion to declare them vexatious litigants, which would prevent future frivolous lawsuits. During this legal battle, my health unexpectedly improved. The stress had initially worsened my symptoms, but something shifted. My body began responding better to treatment, as if fighting external battles had strengthened my internal defenses. Blood tests showed marked improvement in liver function and immune response. My doctors, cautiously optimistic, suggested my system might be naturally adapting to the genetic modifications. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Catherine's daughter, the woman who'd survived similar experiments, invited me to visit her treatment center. She'd established a specialized clinic for others affected by illegal medical research. Her team had developed protocols based on years of trial and error, treatments my biological mother could never have imagined because they required patience and genuine care. I spent a week at the clinic undergoing comprehensive evaluation. The specialists there understood my condition in ways previous doctors couldn't. They'd seen similar cases, learned from failures, developed approaches based on actual patient outcomes outcomes rather than theoretical research. Their treatment plan addressed not just the physical modifications, but the psychological trauma of being an unwilling experiment. Returning home with new hope, I found another escalation waiting. The prison had intercepted letters between my biological mother and Ms. Henderson, planning to hire a private investigator with money from Henderson's remaining assets. They wanted documentation of my daily life to use in their legal battles, proof I was thriving without them to support their emotional distress claims. My lawyer immediately filed injunctions while my parents upgraded security systems. We installed cameras covering every angle of our property, motion sensors, and panic buttons connected directly to police dispatch. The preparations felt excessive until we caught someone photographing our house from a parked car. They fled before police arrived, leaving behind a camera with hundreds of photos spanning several days. The private investigator's involvement marked a turning point. Law enforcement took the harassment more seriously with evidence of paid stalking. Detectives discovered the investigator had been hired through a complex chain of intermediaries, making it difficult to prove direct connection to the imprisoned women. However, the investigation itself created enough pressure to discourage continued surveillance. My adoptive parents suggested relocating, starting fresh somewhere the past couldn't follow. We spent evenings researching communities, looking at houses, imagining life without constant vigilance. But running felt like surrendering, letting them win through fear. Dr. Martinez supported my decision to stay and fight, though she helped me prepare for the psychological toll. The legal proceedings accelerated when both women made critical errors. Mrs. Henderson, frustrated by legal delays, sent a letter directly to the judge overseeing her case. In it, she admitted to filing lawsuits purely to maintain contact with me, believing legal proceedings would force interaction. The judge immediately sanctioned her, forwarding the letter to prison administration and the Bar Association investigating her lawyers. My biological mother's mistake was more elaborate. She convinced another soon-to-be-released inmate to pose as a medical researcher, complete with forged credentials. The woman contacted my new treatment team, claiming to have revolutionary data about my condition. The clinic's security protocols caught the deception immediately, but the attempt violated numerous laws regarding medical fraud and identity theft. These mistakes gave authorities ammunition for serious consequences. The prison transferred both women to higher security units with restricted communication privileges. Their phone access was revoked, mail limited to legal correspondence only, and visiting privileges suspended pending investigation. The isolation they'd tried to inflict on me became their own reality. With their direct harassment channels cut off, they turned to manipulation through the legal system itself. Frivolous motions flooded the court, requests for mediation, demands for depositions, claims of new evidence requiring hearings. Each filing required response, draining time and resources. My lawyer partnered with a legal aid organization specializing in protecting harassment victims, spreading the burden of constant vigilance. The vexatious litigant hearing became a turning point. The judge reviewed years of documentation, the original criminal cases, their harassment from prison, the escalating legal abuse. Both women testified via video link, their arguments revealing the depth of their delusion. They genuinely believed they owned me. That biological connection and shared trauma created unbreakable bonds I had no right to sever. The judge's ruling was comprehensive. Both women were declared vexatious litigants, barred from filing any lawsuit without prior court approval. Existing cases were dismissed with prejudice. Financial sanctions covered my legal costs. Most importantly, the order included provisions making any attempt to circumvent these restrictions a criminal offense that could extend their sentences. Their lawyers withdrew immediately after the ruling, citing ethical obligations they could no longer fulfill. The women were left to navigate the legal system alone, their manipulative tactics useless against procedural requirements they didn't understand. Prison officials reported they'd turned their manipulation inward, attempting to control fellow inmates who quickly learned to avoid them. My health continued improving under the new treatment protocol. The clinic's approach addressed systemic inflammation, cellular mutations, and neurological adaptations simultaneously. Progress was slow but steady, each month bringing subtle improvements. My sensory processing disorder, while still present, became manageable with their techniques. The lead poisoning effects faded as chelation therapy finally showed full effectiveness. 6 months after the vexatious litigant ruling, I received notice that both women had been transferred to different facilities. My biological mother went to a prison specializing in inmates with severe personality disorders. Ms. Henderson was moved to a facility 3 states away after multiple disciplinary infractions. The separation ended their collaborative harassment, each now isolated in their own consequences. The clinic invited me to speak at their annual conference about surviving medical experimentation and subsequent harassment. I accepted, seeing an opportunity to help others trapped in similar situations. My presentation focused on recognizing manipulation, setting boundaries, and finding legitimate medical help despite predators offering false solutions. After the conference, several attendees approached me privately. Each had their own story of medical abuse, family manipulation, or institutional harassment. We formed an informal support network, sharing resources and strategies. The group grew organically, eventually becoming a registered nonprofit focused on protecting victims of medical exploitation. My adoptive parents attended every meeting, their presence a constant reminder of what real family meant. They'd aged during our ordeal, worry lines deeper, sleep patterns disrupted, but they'd never wavered, never suggested the fight wasn't worth it. Their love was action, not words. Security security systems installed, lawyers hired, midnight hospital drives without complaint. A year after cutting contact, I achieved something my biological mother never could have predicted. The clinic's treatment had not only managed my condition, but improved it beyond baseline. My sensory processing, while still different from typical, had become a form of heightened awareness I could control. What she'd tried to create through reckless experimentation, I'd achieved through careful healing. The final legal document arrived on a Tuesday morning. Both women's appeals had been exhausted, their sentences upheld, their harassment definitively ended. The paper felt light in my hands, its official language unable to capture the weight it lifted. Mom made celebratory pancakes while Dad finally dismantled the extra security cameras, keeping only the standard system. That evening, I sat with my parents watching the sunset from our back porch. We didn't discuss the journey, the pain, or the victory. We simply existed together, a family forged through choice and tested by fire. The letters still arrived occasionally, forwarded through lawyers and immediately discarded. But they held no power anymore, just echoes of a battle already won. My recovery continued, supported by genuine medical professionals and loving family. The genetic modifications that should have destroyed me became manageable variations in my biology. The sensory processing disorder that Ms. Henderson tried to disprove became a gift when properly supported. Every day brought new evidence that healing happens through love and science, not manipulation and control. Dr. Martinez helped me process the complete experience during our final sessions. We discussed how trauma could create strength when properly channeled, how surviving manipulation built immunity to future predators. She praised my ability to maintain boundaries while still seeking necessary help, finding real solutions among false promises. Life settled into a new normal. Medical appointments became routine rather than crisis management. Family dinners included laughter instead of strategy sessions. Sarah and I resumed regular activities without constant vigilance. The hypervigilance faded slowly, replaced by appropriate caution and hard-won wisdom. The way they both lost their lawyers and had to handle court stuff alone makes me wonder if they finally understood how alone they'd made themselves.